Hey, Mary Kay, what compensation could the Browns expect to get for Baker Mayfield at this point?
Well, it depends on what their strategy is at this point, because right now, it's a bargain. It's a fire sale. Okay. It is a fire sale for him right now. As you mentioned earlier, the Falcons found their guy in Marcus Mariota. The Saints found their guy in Jameis Winston. The Panthers, every time I try to talk to people connected with the Panthers, I'm told that as of right now, they don't have much interest in Baker Mayfield. They're going to these pro days. They might end up trying to draft a Malik Willis or a Kenny Pickett at number 6 overall. I don't know what else they might do. Maybe they go after a Jimmy Garoppolo. He's still out there too. But as of today, at this moment, I haven't sensed much interest on the part of the Panthers in Baker. Could change at any moment, but that's what I've been hearing right now. As for the Seattle Seahawks, that's a team that, at least what Josina reported, I think last week, that they did reach out to the Browns. There hasn't been any front burner interest in him, but as that price begins to drop, I think that they could get back a little bit more involved. So watch for the Seahawks now that they see that the Browns might be getting a little bit desperate to perhaps jump back in there and offer a later round pick. I mean, it could be a 5th round pick or something like that. You just get to the point where it's like, all right, we have to move on. But some of it will have to do with the money. This is now more an economic decision than even a draft pick compensation decision. This is, what can we get out of that $18.86 million that we owe Baker Mayfield? And, the hope is that they can clear some of that off the books. Now, if a team is willing to have Baker Mayfield be their starting quarterback, they'll be willing to pay him some of that, but maybe not all of that. If they're willing to have him only be their backup quarterback, then they're not going to be very motivated. Now, a recent precedence for this is when Teddy Bridgewater was traded from the Panthers to the Broncos last year. And the Panthers, in addition to the $10 million guaranteed that they owed him, they kicked in another $7 million just to kind of move it forward. And the Broncos only had to pay $3 million for him. So the Panthers ended up with $17 million in dead cap space for Teddy. I mean, look, the Falcons this year are going to have, I think, $40 million on the books in dead cap space for Matt Ryan. So it does happen, and it could happen for the Cleveland Browns. Another strategy really quickly would be to wait a little bit, knowing that you're probably not going to be wiping that whole 18.9 off the books anyways, to wait and see if somebody has an injury. I mean, you could have an injury in the offseason program. Somebody could tear their ACL in the offseason program. Weird stuff like that happens every year. So they can now sit tight for a little bit.
Are you at all surprised that there's like no market for him? I know we've spent all season kind of saying how bad he was, but like, he's not, I don't know. It's hard to categorize him, but I'm just surprised there's not somebody out there that's like, let's take a chance. Let's see what this guy can do. Obviously he hasn't delivered. There's real issues there. But I'm just really surprised there's not somebody out there that's just like, let's just see if we can let's just bring this guy in for a year and just see if there's something there. And if there's not, okay, whatever. I'm a little surprised, and I'm not the biggest Baker fan in the world, but I'm still surprised that there's nothing out there right now.
Yeah, I am a little bit surprised, but I knew as of Thursday when he asked to be traded that there was not a market for him at that point. There was nobody calling. I mean, the only phone call that I have heard about so far was the one that Josina reported about the Seahawks. Other than that, I'm sure there have been conversations, but in terms of anybody, pursuing him, there really hasn't been a whole lot of activity, especially the Colts. The Colts were his number one choice. That is where he wanted to go. And I had heard that so many times. I assumed that he must have thought it was requited love, but apparently it was not. As I just wrote, when I just rewrote that story, he was, they were not as sweet on him as he was on them. And they really did not heavily engage. They probably had a conversation with the Browns because you just do that as a matter of course. But they were, over the last 10 days or so, really intent on landing Matt Ryan. They wanted to upgrade over Carson Wentz. They wanted an obvious upgrade, right? I mean, you're not going to necessarily go Baker Mayfield there and just take a gamble on that when you're coming off Carson Wentz, who had 27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in 2021. And then you're going to go for a guy that had only 17 touchdown passes and 13 interceptions and finished 27th in the NFL and an 83.1 rating. How are you going to sell that to your fan base? How are you going to sell that to your defense? How are you going to sell that to your locker room? Right? I mean, that would have been tough. Those guys are excited now about Matt Ryan. So I knew as of Thursday that the phone was not ringing off the hook for Baker Mayfield and that this might get a little bit challenging. But as I said before, I had somebody tell me today, and I put this in the rewrite that I just did, that that the Steelers will pounce on Baker Mayfield if he becomes available. Like if they cut him and he's just out there as a street free agent, that they would take him in a minute. And I'm sure a lot of people would. If you can get him for nothing, and the Browns have to eat that money, then certainly somebody would go grab him in that scenario. But short of that, I do think it's going to be a situation where they have to hope that something goes wrong. They would not wish injury on anybody, of course, but they just have to hope that somebody sort of desperately needs a starting quarterback, and they are going to be one of the only people in the NFL, except for maybe the 49ers, that have one just ready to plug in for you.